The Transcendental Sandwich by John Sladek. Originally published in a collection of the author's stories called The Steam-Driven Boy and Other Stories in 1973, then republished in another called The Best of John Sladek in 1981. It also appeared in a French anthology in 1977 and a German one in 1987. Read by Darrell T. Smith II from my channel, Quasar Spectra. The Transcendental Sandwich. "We can give you knowledge," said the salesman thing. Claude Mabry looked all around his room. Mildewed wallpaper, broken linoleum, dirty long underwear slung over a chair that had a weak leg, the clock face that had been cracked and repaired so many times with scotch tape that he could hardly see it said 3:20. "I'm smart enough for me," he said. "There's such a thing as being too smart for your own good." "That's right," said the salesman thing. "And there's such a thing as being so smart. You have to wash dishes down at Stan's Chili Bowl to earn enough to live here." Claude could not reply. The whole thing reminded him of the Bible. A snake, or whatever it was, dressed up like a man, offering knowledge. It just didn't make sense. "Look, I don't mean to be unpleasant," said the salesman, "but we Guz are a hell of a lot more powerful and a hell of a lot smarter than your species. If we'd wanted to, we could have vaporized your whole planet. But it's not our way, so when somebody comes offering to make you smart, don't knock it." Claude wanted to rip off that grinning false man suit and see what the Guz looked like. He half rose, then sank back again and looked at the floor. "If you're so good, why do you want to do anything for me?" "I don't want to do anything for you. I voted to turn Earth into a bird refuge. But if we have a democratic form of government and the majority wanted to make your kind fit citizens to share the universe with us..." "All right, how do I know you can make me smart?" The salesman opened his briefcase and took out a handful of bright brochures. "Don't take my word for it that we can make you one of the smartest men on Earth," he said. "Don't take it from me that being smart is worthwhile. Millions are trying our plan. Thousands have tried it already. Have a look." He handed Claude a folder showing full-color pictures of quiet scholars, white-coated scientists, dignified judges, and beaming businessmen. Their testimonials were capped with red headlines. "Couldn't read own name. Now commands 20 languages. Famous economist. Hated arithmetic. The Steam-Driven Boy. Dumb ox to brilliant theologian in 7 months." "But what could I study?" "Everything." The salesman produced another slick booklet and began turning the pages, showing Claude pictures of happy housewives and hairy-handed laborers reading heavy volumes, farmers peering through microscopes, and grannies using slide rules. "We call our system the interface way. Every person we accept must study at least 2 subjects intensively. If the subjects are unrelated, all the better. We mix mathematics with literature. We throw theoretical physics at a medical specialist. We give the mathematician theology." "What would I get?" "If we accepted you, you'd be tested. Then we'd know." "What do you mean, if?" Claude felt he had just been offered $1 million, but at the word if it had shrunk to about a nickel. The stranger, sensing his anxiety, spoke soothingly. "Don't worry too much about that. We won't be testing your IQ or previous knowledge. In fact, the less of either, the better. We want people who haven't had a chance, people who feel useless because the sleeping genius within them has never been awakened. What do you say?" "I don't know. What would it cost me?" "All the money in the world couldn't buy you a better education, pal. But all it costs is your signature." "Well, oh, hell, why not?" "Why not?" echoed the salesman, handing him a pen. Claude signed a few forms in various colors, and the salesman gave him a copy of each. "Claude," he said, "you've just made your first intelligent decision." The Guz had pretty well taken over Earth in every way. Guz developed gadgets were in every home. Clergymen thanked the Lord from their pulpits that the Guz were not warlike or vicious, but a truly democratic, people. The government made daily announcements of new Guz gifts to humanity. They quietly disarmed the nuclear powers. They made efficient clean air and sewage disposal systems for our cities. They introduced new food sources and birth control plans in Asia. Hardly a government bureau in the world had not been approached by the Guz with a suggestion or a gift, and these aliens used no stronger forces than tact and kindly persuasion. The only disagreeable thing about them was the way they looked, both at home and in Earth drag. On their own planet, or so it was said, for no one had yet visited them, the Guz were disagreeably vermiform. Here, so as not to spook the natives, they wore human forms of plastic. Their movements in these were natural enough, but they all looked alike. As far as most people, including Claude, were concerned, the Guz were just so many talking store window dummies. The first box that arrived was a tabletop computer equipped with keyboard, microphone, speaker, and visual display screen. That night, when he returned from Stan's chili bowl, Claude lay awake looking at all that gleaming, complicated junk and wondering if he might have made a mistake in even hoping. Next day, 3 packages arrived. The first contained books and a sheaf of documents, a certification that Claude Mabry was eligible for this correspondence course, more copies of the various forms he'd signed, and a booklet entitled, "Welcome, Future Genius. The government of Guz and your own government wish to take this opportunity to welcome you. Conditions and bylaws. You may not always see the reasons for instructions given you in this course, but they are necessary to ensure efficient use of your time. The enclosed books are for Lesson 1. The books required for each lesson will be provided with the lesson. At various points in the program, you will be asked to study them thoroughly." Claude glanced at the titles of the books. The Interpretation of Dreams, Sigmund Freud. Verbal Behavior, B.F. Skinner. Towards Information Retrieval, Fairthorne, were only a few. The dream book looked interesting, but inside, like all the others, it was full of long-winded sentences that didn't mean anything. The second package contained a tape cassette titled Program for Lesson 1, and simple instructions for loading it into the teaching computer. As soon as Claude could do so, he switched on the machine. He might have expected it to give him a problem, to register the fact that it was turned on, or at least to ask his name, but it did none of these things. Instead, it politely requested him to eat a sandwich. Claude scratched his head. The Guz had to be joking. He could imagine them watching him right now, laughing at his stupidity. So this was the big learning course. So this... He remembered the third package and tore it open. Inside was a cellophane-wrapped sandwich. Though Claude turned it over and over, he could see only one difference between this and any other cellophane-wrapped sandwich. Inside the wrapper was a plain printed name slip, but instead of ham and cheese or peanut butter and grape jelly, it simply read, "Eat me." The bread was a little stale, but he enjoyed the salami or para-salami inside. An hour later, he correctly answered a request to explain how and why dreams were subject to syntactical rules. The answer was obvious. 2 hours later, he had read Ayer's The Problem of Knowledge, read it at skimming speed because it was already perfectly familiar to him. A lesson or two later, Claude had gone through about 50 difficult books without any trouble. He progressed rapidly through the programs, though it did not seem like progress at all. He simply knew what he was doing. Using Fourier analysis to solve problems in electronics seemed something he had always known, just as he had always realized the gross truth of Newtonian mechanics and the finer truth of quantum mechanics, the position of Hubert von Eyck in Flemish painting, the syllogistic properties of an Andrew Marvell poem, the flaws in the historical theories of Spengler and Toynbee, or, for that matter, how to prepare sauce au zen with 7 ingredients. Scraps of learning, areas of learning, even whole complex structures of learning were suddenly his. Having learned, he worked. By the 4th lesson, Claude had gone through Gödel's proof of the necessary incompleteness of mathematical theorems and picked holes in Lucas's application of this to mechanical devices. He had also put forth an aesthetic theory understandable by perhaps 10 men, refutable by no more than 1. He had nearly destroyed mathematical economics and devised a tentative translating machine. He was hardly aware that these things had not been done before, nor was he really aware of the transition from his job at the Chili Bowl to a research fellowship at a prominent university. The transition came about from his publication of various monographs in journals, the names of which he knew only from footnotes in the books he was skimming. Some of the monographs came back. He had sent them to wrong addresses or to journals long out of print. Others, like his Cueing Theory Applied to Neural Activity and On Poetic Diction, became classics. Men with tweedy manners but sharp suits and clean attaché cases came to see him. They sat in the steamy, oily kitchen of Stan's Chili Bowl and talked with him about quasar explanations, new codes of international law, and logic mechanisms. True, many prodigies were springing up now that the Guz offered their massive home study program, but for the time being, genius was still something universities fought over. And so, almost without knowing it, he was thinking of other things. Claude Mabry gave Stan his notice, packed his t-shirts and blue jeans, and entrained for Attica University. He remembered only isolated facts about this trip, sending a change of address card to the Guz, losing his ticket, not bringing enough paper, and so alighting from the train at Attica where university officials were waiting to greet him, his hands so full of slips of toilet paper on which were penciled notes toward a theory of history that he could not accept the handshakes of these venerables. Without comment, he settled into his new life and went on working. From time to time, he wondered what was in the sandwich that came with each lesson, a wonder drug that unlocked hidden knowledge that lay sleeping within him, an intelligence accelerator. Whatever it was essential to the process. The only time he tried studying without it, Claude had floundered among symbols that almost made sense. He wondered, too, about the Guz. The little he learned about their planet and culture, in the final lesson, whetted his appetite for more. He longed to know everything about them, almost to become one of them. They alone would understand what he was doing. It was becoming clear that his colleagues at the university considered him some kind of freak. He would not wear a suit, He could not converse about departmental politics, and he was inhumanly intelligent. Claude ordered all the information on the Guz he could get. This proved to be a slim volume by a second-rate anthropologist who had interviewed a few of the aliens. Claude skimmed it and began a treatise of his own. Despite the advanced democracy of the Guz, he wrote, they retain a few oddly primitive, even sacramental habits. There was a knock at the door. The standard face of a Guz looked around the frame, saw that he was alone, and walked its standard body into the office. Without saying anything, it came over and struck him on the forehead. Twitching, Claude slipped to the floor. The visitor busied itself with a set of plastic bags. The fallen man was muttering. Bending lower, the man-shape heard, "Planarian worms? DNA? Or—"
"Right you are," boomed the Guz. "Yes, we are analogous to your planarian worms. So, of course, are you, and we can transmit behavior genetically."
He fished a long knife from one bag and tested its blade against a false thumb.
"Of course our genes need help. Obviously to include your children do not learn much from their parents' genes. But these same genes, properly assimilated—" "I knew it,"
Claude croaked, getting up on one elbow. The blow had stunned him, but still the machinery of his mind ground on. With an ecstatic expression, he said, "The old taboos against eating the king, eating the old man, the sage, the father, yes?"
"Check."
With a hearty chuckle, the visitor kneeled by Claude's side and felt for the carotid artery.
"Those ridiculous taboos have kept your species back hundreds of thousands of years. We're just now making up the lost time for you."
"The sandwich meat."
"Housewives, mechanics, professional people. All the people in that brochure you saw. Just think of it."
He waved the knife oratorically, and the plastic face turned up as if gazing at a vista.
"One genius provides 3,000 sandwiches, each capable of providing, with no wastage, part of the education for one more genius. Thus learning will transform your whole species. You will become as gods."
The Guz returned his attention to the matter at hand. He poised the knife. "Superman," murmured the genius, "on white or rye."